We're live, Mr. Chair.
Okay. At this point, we'll continue with the school building committee meeting. Agenda adjustments, there are no agenda adjustments for the building committee tonight. Is there any comments from tonight from the public? Seeing none, we'll go right into project approvals. And you're on, my dear.
All right. So can we share the screen? Presentation. All right. So. All right. So briefly take you through a very quick agenda. First, we have meeting approvals. We have 2 sets of meeting minutes, 1 invoice. Those are both up for approval. And then we have a construction manager at risk update, the procurement process for the CM at risk. There is an action item to vote to appoint the pre-qualification and selection committee for that group and that process. And then I'll provide more of an update on that process and timeline for that. And then Carl will summarize what work we've been doing since our last meeting.
Okay.
All right. So the first, yes.
All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our February 15th and 22nd, 2024 school building committee meeting. By Situate, second by Cohasset. Okay, Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Sandy Baldwin,
Yes.
George Cooney,
Yes.
Jim Coughlin,
Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
yes,
Bob Mello,
yes,
Frank Mola,
Yes.
Tom Petroselli,
Yes.
Dustin Reardon,
Yes.
Dan Salvucci,
Yes.
Keith Boyle,
Yes.
and the motion carries for all present. And one other one. Approved invoices is next on my list.
Yes, that is on mine as well. So we do only have one invoice up for approval this evening. It's left field invoice number 11 for OPM services in the month of February in the amount of $29,000. And that is the total being asked for approval this evening.
All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve the invoice. Abington, second by Whitman. Okay. I'll call a roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Sandy Baldwin,
Yes.
George Cooney,
Yes.
Jim Coughlin,
Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
yes,
Bob Mello,
yes,
Frank Mola,
Yes.
Tom Petroselli,
Yes.
Dustin Reardon,
Yes.
Dan Salvucci,
Yes.
Keith Boyle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next is the construction manager risk pre-qualification and selection committee.
Did forget that I snuck this budget update in there, which
Oh,
just summarizes what was just approved and the funds we have available. Sorry, I watched it. It's part of the approvals update. It kind of summarizes the invoices that have been approved to date and the commitments that have been made in the forms of contracts. So we are 75% committed currently, 42% expended. That includes the invoice you just approved. We currently have $505,565 uncommitted funds. We do expect to spend 200,000 of those between now and the end of schematic design. So that leaves us with remaining $305,565 in our remaining feasibility study funds. So I'll touch on how we can spend that, some of that, a small portion, relatively small portion of that on bringing the CM on board in just a minute. Are there any questions on the budget?
anybody see none?
And there is a more detailed version of the budget that's included in the monthly report that was sent out. Actually, it might be just a few more lines on this, but it might be easier to read if you look at it in the monthly report that was sent out with the meeting materials. And if you have any questions, always feel free to just email me. Now we are moving on to the CM at risk update.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
So I have this as the vote to appoint this committee, this subcommittee first, but I could do the update first. However you want.
We can vote this committee right now. I'll entertain a motion to appoint the construction manager risk pre-qualification selection committee. That would be Jen, Carl, Tom Hickey, Bob Mahoney, and Bob Mello.
So moved.
Second.
Whitman, okay, roll call, Bob Hayward, yes. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Sandy Baldner,
Yes.
George Clooney,
Yes.
Jim Coughlin,
Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
Yes.
Bob Mello,
Yes.
Frank Mola,
Yes.
Tom Petroselli,
Yes.
Dustin Reardon,
Yes.
Dan Salvucci,
Yes.
and Keith Boyle.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you. And just to kind of quickly outline the makeup of the committee, the state requires that one member of the OPM firm, one member of the architecture firm, and then a number of awarding authority representatives that outnumber the project team. So that is the makeup here. This group was submitted as the likely group for to the IG's office with the application that we need to submit to basically get their approval of us moving forward with the CM at risk method. And we have received approval from the IG's office on moving forward with this process. So, and just a note on the bottom that all of the pre-qualification and selection committee meetings, including those the interviews with the CMs, those will all be public meetings and publicly posted, and whoever wants to attend those absolutely can.
The reason, I just want to put in the reason Bob and Bob, Mahoney and Mello are on the committee or picked by Tom and I, is basically because of their construction experience in the past. And they're just good fits for that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, could I ask a quick, Jen, could you, oh, I'm sorry, you had an additional slide that might cover my question, I'm sorry.
We'll see. Hopefully I still have an answer if there is a question.
Your timeline, thank you.
Perfect, yes. So this would be on the left here, the CM at risk procurement timeline. So the statement of qualifications from the CM firms are due next Wednesday. That's March 27th. We've had a good amount of interest so far. We advertised the request for qualifications, the RFQ. It's been once on by March 27th. It'll have been 3 weeks, and so we've had quite a number. I think 7 or 8 at this point request the RFQ, and they've received at least 4 or 5 statements of interest, officially saying that they will be submitting on this project. So a lot of interest in this project, I think, which is exciting, from a lot of top-notch firms as well. So once we receive those SOQs, they're called the statements of qualification, we will be scheduling a selection committee meeting for the week of April 1st. So I'll reach out to the committee and get that scheduled. So that week we'll be reviewing those SOQs that came in. We'll be reviewing it just to make sure they've met all the requirements. I'll have a matrix that'll break it down so it's easier to digest everything that comes in. There are a lot of technical aspects and a lot of just documents that are asked for. At that meeting, the selection committee will decide which firms are deemed qualified to move on to the next round. We'll get into that more in our first meeting, of course. But from there, once we vote on that it could be a smaller group, it could be the same amount of folks that submitted. Those folks will move forward. I'll send them the request for proposals at that point, which is the RFP. They will then be submitting technical and price proposals to at the same time. but we are only allowed to open the technical proposals at that point and rank them based on the, that information on their technical proposals. And we'll be having interviews with that same group. So after the interviews, we'll rank the firms based on the interviews and the technical proposals, and then we're allowed to open up the price proposals and compare those and then rank the firms again. Just because this is a process that's based on the qualifications, but we do get to see the price before we do the final ranking of the firms before we move forward with the what they call the law is the most advantageous firm. So that, as you can see, we're trying to get that whole process wrapped up, interviews, notice of award, in time to have the SBC approve the CM contract at their May meeting, targeting the 23rd at this point, but we'll confirm if that works for everybody. We haven't quite set that date. So, and then from timeline to available funds, as I mentioned earlier, we have an uncommitted funds in the amount of $305,565. And we only expect the CM feasibility pre-con fee, the fee that gets us through schematic design. We only expect that to be somewhere between $55,000 and $65,000 based on the amount of time that they'll be with us on the project. Are there questions? Yes.
On the calendar here, it's the 27 to the 4/1. Will we have the opportunity, since they do that day, will we get a copy of those
Yes.
to read up on beforehand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. This first round will. I was gonna say this first round will be digital. Just because it's more boilerplate information. For proposals, there'll be more project specific, and those we request hard copies. For anyone who wants them, which is usually everyone, because it's nice to have those in hard copy. So the first round will be digital, but I'll make sure to be clear on which pages are the ones that you would want to focus on. I'll be taking all of them and comparing in a matrix that compares them against the RFQ, and then that'll show us where they stand, if they've met all the requirements and things like that.
That's a question. Just to go over some things. When are we gonna have the vote from all the different towns for the pass this?
On April 24th, we're going to reconvene the town clerks from the district.
Okay.
At that meeting, my hope is to get some updated feedback from them. We did have interest from one community where I was asked at a meeting whether we would consider holding an election not on January 25th, but perhaps a little closer to springtime. When I asked in the follow-up if that meant something like March or April, the answer was yes. And so
Now, March of April of this year.
it's 25.
Okay.
So we are anywhere from 10 to 12 months away from the voters of our district rendering a decision. If we were to, what I'm hoping to do is to have the town clerks who ultimately have to come to consensus. If there's a sentiment that says, yes, so there's an interest in not having it in late January, maybe there's weather-based concerns, then we could perhaps do it on Saturday, March 1st or Saturday, March 8th, which is outside of the traditional winter window. It's about a 5 or 6 week delay. So that, I think, Dan, it would be good for everybody, the clerks especially, to coalesce around a date. And if they do so, what I'm hoping is that they will also communicate with their town managers or town administrators to see if there's any sentiment there. What the project team will tell us is that any estimates that have been talked about thus far were based roughly on a late January vote because procurement would start. So there's a potential for an increase of about $500,000 per month for each month in which you would delay. That's very rough estimates, but you can understand that if the plan was to go and start the procurement process, let's say in February of '25, and maybe it means we have to wait until late March of '25, there's a slight moving of those goalposts. But we have to get consensus on when to have this election. So, but that's the latest information I have right now. So it's not definite, but it will be good for the project team and for everyone to know when the towns are willing to do it.
Well, third week in March, first week in March, when most town meetings have their,
May.
May.
Yeah. So there's the first Saturday of March in 2025 is March 1st.
Right,
So if,
because towns will have, most towns will have election in March, and then another one in May. So, yeah, there's enough.
yeah, the question that you could take your question one step further, and it's a town-specific decision whether or not they wanted to schedule their own debt exclusion election on the same day. So we have our ballot, that's our question. And if a town says, well, we also want to hear from the voters, are they willing to fund their share of it through a debt exclusion? We may see some of our communities, which has nothing to do with us, deciding that on the same day to have a separate ballot that would ask the second question in a sequence. Do you support the vote project? Are you willing to pay for it through a debt exclusion? It's not a requirement, and other communities might say, we're going to ask our voters that question, but perhaps we put it on a local ballot. And I'm not a local ballot expert, but I think that the towns each have options on how to proceed.
Well, what other option, it's either a debt exclusion or within the budget?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a tough decision to make on a town, because, especially when you get other building projects going.
Right, so there may be interest, and I think there is some interest for a community to say, the district gets to vote as in one entity, an aggregate vote. And at the same time, voters in town X might also have a question that says, are you willing to support this through a debt exclusion? That way, town financial teams know exactly where they would stand at the time that the voters weigh in on the project.
And in the past, we've always had it within the budget and not a separate. When they added it on, for when Whitman Hanson joined, they added on that whole new wing, right?
Oh, I'm not sure, Dan. That vote was taken just before I started.
Yeah.
I don't know how that was handled. It could have been handled through the individual town meeting method. I've never seen any records that it was a district-wide ballot. I'm feeling as though this,
Right.
other than perhaps the chartering of the school, perhaps, that was a,
Okay, and
I'm
does
not sure.
all towns have to agree majority of the towns have to agree on that question one way or another? I mean,
are you referring to the debt exclusion
Yeah.
or the vote itself?
yeah, no, if one town, if out of all the votes you have, there are more votes for having it within the budget than a debt exclusion, right? And the towns that want it on a debt exclusion, separate budget area, they have to go with the majority, right?
So it's not town specific. When we go to a ballot for our project, it will be an aggregate vote. Zip codes get erased, we become one district, it's the total number of yays or nays.
Right.
So if that question is settled and the project passes, every member of our district is obligated to fund the project. Now, each town gets to decide in their own process how they want to fund it. So now, town X might say, this assessment is very, very small. We think we can fit it under the levy limit. We're not going to have a local election to answer that question. Or they might say, we will ask the voters, but we can afford, maybe we'll wait a couple of months till the May local elections in our town. And others may want to ask that question almost immediately on a separate ballot the same day. If a debt exclusion question passes, then the town has the means to set that part of any future assessments aside and attach it as a debt exclusion. So every town has the autonomy to decide the funding.
Right. So the funding is according to towns, the project is according to the majority votes of all the districts.
Combined, you got it exactly right.
50%.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It bears repeating, you know.
I mean, that's the question I have to ask, not as a school committee representative, but as a, you know,
Yes,
letting their bites out.
absolutely.
Not a problem. You're on.
I think that's all I have for my slides, so,
Okay,
tell us.
sure, I can give you an update. I don't have any pretty pictures tonight because we're in a transition period here between the submittal that we recently made to the MSBA. We're waiting for their comments back. As they do on every submittal, they have comments that we will be obligated to respond to, and generally in 2 weeks' time. We are also preparing for what's known as the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee that reviews submittals prior to it going to the board. It's kind of you could say, a less formal way for their few key members of their board to review projects. And ask a few questions, and the staff will follow up with us, the district, to make sure their concerns are addressed as we move forward. So we're sort of technically not officially into the schematic design phase, because that happens when they vote at the end of April, but we don't wait around. We are starting to take the project to the next level, you might say. And the basic goal of this phase is to describe the scope, the schedule, and the budget for the project. So that by the time we submit again to the state, those three aspects are well defined and everyone is willing to live with it, because it really becomes a contract between the district and the state. They tell us how much money they're going to give you, and you agree to build this project on this schedule, and it's consists of these materials and these systems, this sort of level of quality. So that's kind of our goal then as the design team, is to define those aspects in the next few months here. We are working on upgrading and updating our work plan to identify topics that we will be discussing on a weekly basis, virtually from now through July or so. Because at some point we have to give our information, our drawings and specifications to cost estimators. And as Jen mentioned, it'll be not just our independent cost estimator, but the construction manager, as well as the OPM's cost estimator. So we'll have good cost assurance, I guess you might say, by three different cost estimators independently, and then they'll come together as they did previously and reconcile. And that has to happen before we can submit in August. So for us, we have to sort of back up and be ready basically by the 4th of July to give them that information. So we'll be busy the next few months, but there are opportunities in addition to these, monthly building committee meetings to, provide input at those weekly working group meetings. For instance, today we met and we talked a little bit about some basic layout issues as we start to sort of develop the design, take it to the next level, and also start thinking about more specifically some design, you might say aesthetics, as to how are we going to, what materials are we going to put on the exterior of the building, what kind of windows, what kind of glass, what sort of materials, and so forth. That are obviously important from a design point of view, a cost point of view, and so forth. But there are numerous topics like that we'll touch on. We'll also be updating some information. For instance, now that we know kind of more specifically where the new building is to be sited, we're going to have our engineers go back out in the field and do some borings and test pits in more specific locations, so that we know what the soils are like, we know what the groundwater levels are like. It's pretty important information that from a design point of view that we'll be looking to get in the next month or so. We'll also have a traffic engineer taking a look a little more closely at the proposed flow of traffic internally on the site, as well as the intersection points on Webster Street, helping advise what makes sense there. So they'll be doing some traffic counts and that sort of thing. What else I wanted to touch on? So basically, as we said, we'll be refining the design. It'll be generally consistent with what you've seen already in that NC 2.0 for 900 students. But there'll certainly be fine tuning as we'll have another round of, you might say, programming information. We want to sit down again with all of the instructors in each individual shop, because we have to start thinking about not just how much space they need, but how that space is allocated, what kind of equipment. Because remember, part of the budget is not just building the building, but it's also buying the equipment there too. So we have to develop an inventory during this phase that says, you know, each shop, each classroom, each office, how much furniture, how much of it's new, how much of it is reused, things like that, to develop that portion of the budget as well. So we'll be scheduling some meetings again in the next month or so with the staff, with the instructors, to cover that information. And then likewise, one of the topics will be determining the mechanical, electrical systems in more detail. And so our engineers will be back at working group meetings and presenting their recommendations and that sort of thing. And again, we'll try and keep that list updated with the topics and circulate so that those of you who are interested can join those meetings. Because it's a little hard in this format to get into too much detail in reviewing plans and design choices and so forth. So we like to do it in the working group. So I think that's our report for tonight. Is there questions?
I have another question. When this project, the town agrees to it and we go out to bid, we get all the bids, now we start the project. Is any of the work that we do, and the reason I'm asking this is because I watched Keith, your guy, cleaning up the front of the school, overturning the soil. Is any of the part of the building project a teachable event that we're in a vocational school system?
Certainly.
And without putting them in danger, but still.
Sure. No, it can start actually even before construction starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can, and we have in other projects, shared our design process with students. There are those students who are interested in that part of the process too. You've got HVAC and plumbing and electrical students. They'd love to see our, the work our engineers put together and designing those systems that go. So before it even gets built, we can share it on screen or, the plans.
Right, yeah.
And come talk to classes and so forth. During construction, again, that's one of the questions we can ask of our construction managers. A lot of them have had experience, leading tours of students who are coming to their classes and talking about what they do and how they do it, OSHA requirements and things like that. So
What the heck,
to get some free instruction, without having to pay another teacher, you can have construction managers come and talk about their various trades. So that's definitely possible.
And if any of the construction workers get hurt, we get allied.
There you go. And actually, in some projects too, during the summer, some students have been able to be hired to actually work on it. You can't technically have the school do some of the work under the MSBA project.
Yeah.
But just like you have co-op students, you can have students get hired. Sometimes that does happen.
Yeah.
And then the other way too, that we typically want to try to achieve is to actually, so you might say, leave out some portions of the work from the contractor's work so that in the coming years, students can finish certain pieces like, building a barn, building a shed, building a concession building, maybe building some casework or cabinetry that goes into the school, display cases, things like that. So we can work with the folks in those various trades.
We're a vocational school. If it's
Exactly.
a teachable moment,
And it
why
saves
not?
money, and it saves money too, obviously, in the long run.
Anyone else? Well, that's it.
The $1 million question I keep asking is, when are we gonna find out, when is the drop dead date, are we gonna find out what MSBA's number is going to be?
Yes, so that is part of the schematic design submission. So in August, we're going to be submitting the budget, first the budget 2 weeks before the whole package. And then we submit that whole schematic design package. They have 2 months to review it. Officially, we will find out at probably just around their board meeting date on October 30th of this year. We'll find out what their maximum grant amount would be. We'll have discussions between August, the August submission, I think it's August 29th that we're submitting, and that October 30th board date, so that we'll understand what they're thinking. But officially, that board date is when they
So October 2024.
For comparison, we have a couple projects right now that are looking to get to that point at next month's board meeting, the end of April. And we just found out yesterday from the MSBA, so what's that, like 6 weeks in advance maybe of the board meeting as to what the grant would be officially. And it turned out to be lined up with the OPM's estimate, which was generated maybe a month prior. So, generally over 2 months prior, you have an idea of what the grant's gonna be, and then at least a month in advance or so, you generally have it, in writing. It doesn't get voted on until the board meeting.
Please tell me it was more than 34%.
So, well, we don't know what it's gonna be, but, unfortunately, like we've demonstrated, there's the stated reimbursement rate on eligible costs, and then there's all those ineligible costs that bring down the effective rate. On that project, their stated rate was 66%, and the effective rate turned out to be 46% on that project, so.
Still better than 34.
Yes.
Okay,
I
just opened it up.
I got
So
one.
basically,
Wait a minute. When do we, or how do we start informing our communities?
there you go.
How do we, or do you prepare things for us? Or do we get a group together? Because I know as a school, we can't.
right.
So if you could walk me through that a little bit?
Yes, so over the next few months, I think it's a good time to, start getting out to communities. We're going to be working with the superintendent to put a plan in place to, how do you get the word out about the project fast? And then we've
Because
seen.
even today, I got a QR.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to date, we've been trying to, go to public meetings and things like that. But I think some things that internally we've talked about is over the summer, there's farmers market, going to where the people are and just having flyers and handouts and directing people to the website and having conversations with people. I think that's going to be an important part of the summer months, just to keep that in the forefront of everybody's mind while they're, off from school. You don't have the captive audience you do during the school months. So I think some things like that. Adele Sands from our office has some ideas, so we'll be looping her into that discussion with Tom, and probably use one of those working group meetings to kind of discuss the path forward. There's also just getting folks, other projects. I know that, we can't advocate, you can't advocate, nobody can advocate for the project, but there are, groups that, we can give information, the correct facts. We can provide facts to groups that are in support, that really getting the facts out of the project is this group's job. But I think getting people that are in support of the project, interested and involved, can be a major factor as well. So it's not just getting out and having the conversations.
I didn't know if we'd have pamphlets that we could drop off places that would lead them to the Facebook page or the YouTube or whatever you're doing.
Right. So we've had in other communities, you have like either a little postcard or stickers or something that have a QR code that gets us back to the website, because I think the project website is the spot where we're gonna have all the facts, all the information. We'll be able to, based on what discussions and questions are happening in the community, we'll be able to tailor the project the homepage to really put the facts out there, so that people don't have to search for information, because that's when it gets a little bit, right. So I think that's gonna be an important part of the summers, getting that sort of information, getting people to the website and getting them informed, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Okay. I hate to be a pain, but
You've always been.
I got a lot of projects working and like that. So you're saying the state will reimburse us on reimbursable parts of the new school. Is there anything that's not reimbursable parts of the school? I know if you have like an oversized auditorium or something that doesn't make sense, like we're having another project right down, but other than that, but I mean, and then they may say, no, we're not gonna pay for that, that's on you. Are we gonna have any areas?
Mr. Chair, I think, and Jen and Carl can speak to it, there are the caps that they talk about
Yeah.
per square foot.
Yeah.
That's what so it may be that something is ineligible on, just by definition. Like, there are certain, like a wastewater treatment plant
Right.
is ineligible,
Even though it's a necessary thing?
ineligible.
Okay,
But another way that percentage drops like a stone is when, if the state sets the same per square foot reimbursement rate
yeah,
for vocational schools it does for a regular high school, and our schools are more expensive to
Yeah.
construct, you've just created that. Now there are just more, just for the cost of
Right, yeah.
construction, there are fewer
Yeah.
dollars per square foot that are eligible. But yes, Carl and Jen know very well what things are absolutely out of bounds. And that's part of the strategy, like our multi-purpose auditorium is about 1,600 square feet less than what is eligible, because we're saying that we're probably gonna need to target those dollars elsewhere in the project. So they're starting to make some strategic decisions.
Right.
But then there are just some bread and butter things that you have to have, and which is why the eligible reimbursement rate that will end up in the project, that becomes part of the project funding agreement, and the actual reimbursement rate, when Carl talks about that project that went from 66 on paper to 46 actual, that's what he's talking about. Those costs that are not reimbursable.
right, so, but we should know upfront what costs
Oh,
are
that-
not reimbursable?
That will not be a surprise. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll know the truth then.
Now, the other question, and you just opened up the door, what can we do to convince the state that vocational education, the cost of doing a new building, is a lot more than a traditional regular high school? I mean, I was at the school committee conference and I talked about this at our meeting, and I just, I don't know how many people I might have ticked off, but I didn't care, saying that, you know, a new vocational school building per square foot costs more, right? It's not a square classroom with all desks, you've got shops, right? And it should be a different rate. So what can we do? I mean, my state rep, I mean, on my phone, I can call her anytime I want. I don't know if there's a certain,
There is I think, a piece of legislation still in process that's supported by MAVA.
Yes.
yeah,
They,
I think maybe I just me talking a lot, maybe it helped a
Yeah,
lot.
and so, yeah, if you have connections with the state reps and
Yeah.
state senators, to try to get on board with that.
Sure.
I don't know exactly where it stands, but we recently, got Tri-County project approved last year. And they were still talking about it. Unfortunately, they didn't, nothing was changed to help their reimbursement at that time, but they were trying to get, for instance, some vocational school representation on the MSBA board so that they could tackle that project.
That part
Unfortunately,
is-
you've only got a few months to do it because it has to be done by October when the MSBA is gonna vote on this project.
Yeah,
Any rate, that's effective at that point is the one that's gonna get, memorialized in your agreement.
maybe Tom, you could draft a letter and send it to Allison Sullivan, all the state reps and senators in each of the 9 districts.
I have certainly conveyed that. I'm also in the process of scheduling a legislative breakfast for May 10th, and we're waiting to get some feedback. So I'd like to have our legislative delegation or designees come so that we could talk to them in person. That's a Friday. They tend to like to gather on Fridays for those kind of events. that's not in stone, that's in pencil, but we're starting to get some feedback. I was also in touch with Senator Markey's office about the potential for putting in there's a proper term for it, I'll call it an earmark, but there's a better political term for it, which is, we're looking for special consideration. I was happy to read over the application until I got to the part that said, earmarks can't be used for school construction, but it could be used for curriculum development. So I'm asking myself, I'm gonna ask them whether or not I could possibly put something in that we might be able to ask for some seed money for the 2 new programs we're going to start. So we're also in touch with, I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks with looking at local philanthropy, looking at a capital campaign. The idea, and this is separate from the ballot question, this is just about, do we need to show our community that we will be committed to finding other revenue sources? We will enlarge our district. We will keep a sharp pencil on the schematic design costs. We will look to the federal government. We will ask our state delegation for support, either through regulation at the MSBA or perhaps through the state budget process, even a small amount. Can we reach out to industry partners? We will not have an industry partner who will just come in out of nowhere and say, I'll name that wing after me and we're all good. But we do know that people care that the folks that are receiving our graduates and employing them also continue to support us with operating costs. So whatever story we have to tell over the next 10 months, it won't be for a lack of saying, if there are other options out there, if there, the Mike Rowe Foundation, Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe, his foundation, I checked, gives out scholarships to individual kids, not for programming. So I think a full court press in all of these areas, but our legislative delegation certainly has influence over whether or not they would support changes in the MSBA regulations, or if the MSBA has discretion. We're enlarging our district, we're adding a town. Carl and Jen know that there are incentive points for expanded regional districts. But when I read the fine print, it seems as though we didn't create a new district from scratch, we've expanded a district. That's another question I'd like to ask MSBA, that if they have the discretion to interpret an expanded district, like, isn't this what we want? We want to regionalize and share resources. Shouldn't we get a couple extra credit points for that? Because a couple of percentage points on the reimbursement rate equals millions.
Right.
So I think if the residents of our district know that we are pursuing the MSBA process to plan, but at the same time asking what other revenue sources are out there, then nobody can say we didn't try. So, but legislative delegation at the Brass Lantern in early May, that's on our docket.
Is that a hard number, the 10?
It's the only number that we floated out there for now. It's after most
Supposed to
town
be invited.
meetings. Everyone will be invited. Once I know I can get at least a staff person or the elected official themselves, I'd like to welcome
But
anybody. who
you
wants to
can't
come.
speak, man.
Huh?
But you can't speak.
No, because I probably talked to Allison.
I can schedule a breakfast and a lunch, Dan, if you have something to say.
No, it's a Friday. I'm wide open on Friday. My wife babysits for grandchildren, so we bring the grandkids, so I can do what I want.
There we go.
Well, it's
We got the day.
I just, so that, if we stick with the election in early December, or January, I'm sorry, of 25, and we get to October, that gives us 90 days that we'll have the exact reimbursement number to go back to the towns with to help you with that vote.
Yes, right.
January 25,
Yes.
January 25 to October 24. So we'll just have 90 days to get that positive information out, which would be.
Generally, what we see, Bob, is that somewhere, say in the middle of summer, you put out a number that says anticipated grant, and then in early October, it changes to,
People might project put up with anticipated, they want to know hard numbers,
yeah.
what it's going to be. I can't say, well, the sale ends today.
There'll be an asterisk next to it, yes.
But also consider what Superintendent was just mentioning too, about pursuing other grant sources too. You may know the total project number, you may not know what the district share is so precisely. if you can get grants, it might lower the, so.
But anything after the fact would be a bonus.
Yeah.
Onto that, but it could give them the hard numbers.
Yeah, well, grant for equipment.
Yeah, we're gonna pursue rebates, from the energy companies, which is pretty substantial these days as well.
I don't know what the rules are on loaning money and whether we could get outside entities who would give us a low interest loan that would, I don't know how you procure that stuff, but those are the other areas.
If I hit Powerball tonight, you can watch.
Just a 0% interest ban would make a big difference, that's all. Just saying.
Tom,
I'm not sure if this is a good question, on the town meeting we're about to get involved in. Is that a place where we could briefly touch upon what we're up to here?
The short answer, Tom, is yes, and I would say the best way to do it, even though we're not on the warrant, would be to prepare a flyer.
Yeah.
That would simply, and that is one of the Office of Campaign Finance's rules of the road, and I'll recirculate that information to you.
Just makes it touchy Steve right there.
We have the right to, we have to, there's a fine line between using school resources for advocacy, but an informational handout that we place on a counter and let interested people take
right.
is not the same thing as using the school Blackboard robocall system to say, vote for this project or else.
Right.
So that one is a no-no, but the first one, so
Just information.
just information,
Cable.
because if a few hundred people pick it up and in between articles, if, we all do that, right? We pick up a whole
Sure.
bunch of stuff on the counter
Yeah.
and then we start going through it at town meeting. We could absolutely have something in there that simply lays out the facts as we know it today. Not the consequences if you don't, not think of the children, but just the facts. Here's what we picked, here's what we're designing for, here's a timeline, here's some estimate, the greatest hits of what we already know.
Right.
On one side of one piece of paper. Yes, we could. It's a good idea, and it's something that we can do starting with Abington's April 1st
Right.
town meeting. I can check to see what the protocol is for getting permission to place something down, go from there.
Anyone else? Nope. All set? I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Whitman and Atherton. I'll call the roll. Bob Hayward, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
Sandy Ballmer.
Yes.
George Cooney.
Yes.
Jim Coughlin.
Yes.
Bob Mahoney.
Yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
Well, glad to hear you, Jack. Well,
Yes.
Frank Moore.
Yes.
Tom Petroselli.
Yes.
Dustin Reardon.
Yes.
Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
Keith Fuller.
Yes.
Motion carries. We are now adjourned.